His father is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He owns businesses that stretch across an entire country: real estate, construction, infrastructure, private fleets. And somewhere inside all of that, a son who decided the best way to spend that kind of money was to build a life that looks like a movie set. Custom Rolls Royces, a watch collection that costs more than most people's homes, a family compound in Yerevan overlooking the city his father helped redesign from the ground up, private jets, floors of high rises, and now a UFC lightweight title shot that puts him one fight away from becoming the richest champion the division has ever seen. But here is the part nobody is actually talking about. The money did not make Arman Tsarukyan, and it certainly did not make him soft, because when you find out what his father actually built, the scale of it, the sacrifices behind it, and the empire that came out the other side, you stop seeing Arman as a fighter with a rich family. You start seeing him as the final piece of something that has been decades in the making. This is the story of the Tsarukyan Empire, where it came from, what it looks like, and why Arman carrying a UFC belt would not just be a sports moment. It would be the completion of something his father started before Arman ever threw his first punch. Before we get into the details, you have to understand the backdrop, because without it, nothing that follows lands the way it should. Armenia is a country of roughly 3 million people. It is landlocked, surrounded by 4 neighboring countries, and its economy was one of the most disrupted in the entire post-Soviet world after the collapse of the USSR in 1991. What followed was decades of rebuilding, and within that rebuilding, a small number of people positioned themselves to shape what the country would become. Arman Tsarukyan is one of those people, and he did not inherit that position. He built it from almost nothing during one of the most economically volatile periods in modern Armenian history. That is the backdrop. That is what makes the size of what you are about to hear actually mean something. The foundation of everything Arman owns, drives, wears, and lives in starts with one man, his father, Arman Tsarukyan. And Arman is not just wealthy in the way that a successful businessman is wealthy. He is powerful in the way that changes a country's skyline. Arman Tsarukyan is the founder and chairman of the Tsarukyan Group, one of the largest and most diversified private conglomerates in Armenia. And when people say diversified, they mean it in the broadest possible sense. This is not a man who built one company and cashed out. This is a man who built an ecosystem. The construction and real estate arm of the Tsarukyan Group is responsible for some of the most significant developments in and around Yerevan. Residential towers that change how the capital looks from the air, commercial complexes, infrastructure developments, projects tied to government contracts that reshape how cities function, not just how they appear. These are not boutique developments. These are the kinds of projects that appear in architectural timelines of the country's growth. But the group does not stop at construction. It extends into manufacturing, into agriculture, into wholesale trade and distribution across the South Caucasus region. Arman Tsarukyan has built a conglomerate that, when viewed in its entirety, represents one of the most comprehensive private business empires in the region. Net worth estimates tied to his name have consistently circulated in figures that place him among the wealthiest individuals in the entire South Caucasus. With some calculations, once real estate holdings and business assets are fully accounted for, pointing toward figures that climb well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And then there is the political dimension, because Arman Tsarukyan is not only a businessman, he is the founder and leader of the prosperous Armenia Party, one of the major political parties in the country, and a sitting member of the National Assembly. That combination, private empire and public political office, is what makes the Tsarukyan name something that operates on an entirely different level than wealth alone. In Armenia, you do not just know the Tsarukyan name, you feel it in the buildings you walk into, in the political conversations you hear, in the roads and developments that define how the capital functions. When people say Arman Tsarukyan's father owns a city, they are not exaggerating for effect. They are describing something that is genuinely close to the truth. And into this world, Arman was born, not to coast in it, to carry it forward. Now let's talk about the cars, because this is where the lifestyle stops being abstract and becomes something you can actually see and feel. And the Tsarukyan car collection is not what you would expect from a fighter. It is what you would expect from a family that has been wealthy for long enough that luxury is no longer exciting. It is just normal. The most talked about vehicle connected to Arman Tsarukyan is a custom Rolls-Royce Cullinan The Cullinan is Rolls-Royce's flagship SUV, the most expensive production SUV on the market from one of the most prestigious automotive brands in the world. Base price starts at approximately $340,000. But Arman's version is not a base model, not even close. A fully customized Cullinan with bespoke paint, a personalized interior, custom badging, and hand-finished details that are unique to the individual buyer can clear $400,000 to $450,000 without breaking a sweat. This is not a car you walk into a dealership and buy. This is a car you sit with a Rolls-Royce designer and build from scratch over the course of several months. Beyond the Cullinan, Arman has been connected to a Lamborghini Urus, Lamborghini's performance SUV, which opens at roughly $230,000 in standard spec and escalates fast once you touch the options list. There is also a Mercedes-AMG presence in his fleet, multiple vehicles. The AMG lineup, particularly the G63 and the SL variants, is the kind of everyday luxury that people with serious money keep around, because it functions as the practical option in a garage full of things that are not practical at all. What you have to understand about the car collection is that these vehicles are not parked somewhere as trophies. They are used in Yerevan, on the streets of a capital city that has been shaped by the same family that owns the cars. There is something about that image, a custom Rolls-Royce navigating a post-Soviet city, that tells you more about the scale of the Tsarukyan family's presence in Armenia than any balance sheet number ever could. If the cars are the most visible layer of the lifestyle, the watches are the most intimate, and Arman Tsarukyan's watch collection is the kind that does not sit in a display case. It moves with him, on his wrist, in public, at press conferences, at weigh-ins, as casually as most people wear a fitness tracker. He has been photographed wearing Audemars Piguet, specifically the Royal Oak, which is one of the most iconic and copied reference designs in the entire history of watchmaking. A steel Royal Oak opens around $30,000 to $40,000. A gold version is closer to $80,000 to $120,000. A diamond set variant climbs past $200,000. These are not the accessible end of the luxury watch market. These are the watches that serious collectors spend years trying to acquire. He has also been seen wearing Patek Philippe. And if you know anything about watches, you know that Patek is a different category entirely. Patek is the brand that watch collectors call the apex. Entry-level Patek models begin around $20,000. The Nautilus, the Aquanaut, the Calatrava, these are reference numbers that people track on waiting lists and buy at auction for 2 and 3 times retail. They are not purchases, they are commitments. His specific pieces are not the entry-level ones. And then there are the Richard Mille watches. If you are not familiar with Richard Mille, here is the short version. They are the most technically audacious wristwatches made in any real volume today. Originally developed alongside Formula One drivers, the cases are constructed from materials borrowed directly from aerospace and motorsport engineering. Carbon TPT, titanium alloys, sapphire crystal that can withstand the G-forces of a racing car. A standard Richard Mille begins around $100,000. Limited editions and collaboration pieces regularly sell at auction for north of $1 million. Arman wears these pieces in the same way other people wear a watch they bought at an airport. Put all of it together, the Audemars, the Patek, the Richard Mille, and the watch collection on Arman Tsarukyan's wrist on any given day represents a figure that comfortably exceeds 7 figures in total value. This is not a collection. It is a financial portfolio you can wear. Now let's talk about where he actually lives, because the property dimension of the Tsarukyan Empire is where you truly start to understand what it means to be born into this family. The Tsarukyan family compound outside Yerevan is not a house in any conventional sense. It is a private estate. Multiple structures across a secured, gated property. The scale of the residence is visible even in the limited content that has made it out publicly. The grounds, the exterior architecture, the sheer size of the main residence relative to anything surrounding it. Inside, the finished level reflects exactly what you would expect from a family at this standard. European marble, bespoke millwork, custom furnishings from designers that most people reading interior design magazines have never been able to afford. The estate is not decorated. It is curated, but the property story does not end at the family compound. The Tsarukyan Group's real estate holdings extend into the commercial developments that Hamlet has built across the country. There are floors of high-rise buildings in Yerevan that carry the family's fingerprints, not just as developers, but as owners of the finished product. The scale of what the group controls in Armenian real estate alone is the kind of figure that makes the phrase owns a city feel less like hyperbole and more like an accurate description of the family's actual footprint in the country's built environment. And socially, Arman Tsarukyan moves to Yerevan with a visibility that goes far beyond money. He is a national figure. His fights stop conversations. His walkouts are watched as moments of Armenian pride. His wins trend not just in combat sports media, but across general Armenian news coverage. When you combine that with his father's political and economic institutional weight, what you have is a family that is simultaneously the country's most prominent private empire and its most celebrated athletic representative. That is a combination that does not exist for most athletes anywhere in the world. When Arman travels to the United States for training camps and fight weeks, the lifestyle does not scale back, it simply moves locations. He trains out of American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California, one of the highest concentration elite training environments in the history of the sport. The names that have come out of AKA read like a Hall of Fame ballot, and inside that gym, Arman earns nothing from his last name. The rounds are the same for everyone. The grind does not care who your father is. But outside the gym, the lifestyle is fully intact. Fight week hotel accommodations that match the level he lives at in Armenia, private dining, a standard of travel and preparation that reflects someone who has never had to choose between comfort and performance. Both have always been available to him simultaneously. There's a detail worth noting here that most people overlook when they talk about Arman Tsarukyan's life in the United States. When he arrives for a fight week, he does not arrive the way most fighters arrive. There is no scramble, there is no stretch in the per diem. Everything is arranged at a level that reflects a family that approaches every environment, whether it is Yerevan or Las Vegas or New York, with the same standard. That consistency is itself a statement. It is the behavior of someone who is not performing well for the camera. It is the behavior of someone for whom this is simply the baseline. And that makes the gym contrast even sharper, because when that same person walks into AKA and starts putting in rounds with some of the most dangerous fighters on earth, the money becomes completely invisible. What you see is just a fighter, a very, very good one, who made a choice every single morning to be there. There is something important in that contrast, because what you are seeing at AKA is that Arman Tsarukyan chose the hardest version of this. He chose a sport where the money his father built means nothing inside the octagon. He chose to put himself in a gym full of killers and earn his place among them on pure merit. And then he chose to live outside of that gym exactly the way someone with his resources should live. He does not use the wealth to avoid the grind. He uses the grind to justify the wealth. And that distinction is the key to understanding who Arman Tsarukyan actually is. Here's what most people miss when they see the cars, the watches, the estate, the fleet, the compound, all of it. They see it and they think the story is about excess. They think this is a fighter who benefits from family money and lives large because he can. And at the surface level, that reading is not completely wrong. But here's what is actually happening. The Tsarukyan family built something real in one of the most difficult economic environments on the planet. Over a period of multiple decades, they did not inherit a dynasty. They constructed one from the ground up during a period of national economic crisis, through industries that require real technical and strategic competence to operate at scale. That is the actual story behind the money. And Arman, who had every reason in the world to stay comfortable inside that story, chose to write his own chapter in the hardest arena he could find. He became one of the top 3 lightweights on the planet. He beat Charles Oliveira. He submitted Kevin Lee. He has put together a body of work that would be impressive for any fighter, but for a fighter who literally never needed to fight, it is something different. It is evidence of a character that money cannot explain and comfort cannot produce. The cars are real, the watches are real, the compound is real, the political influence is real, the conglomerate is real, but the most valuable thing in the Tsarukyan Empire right now is a competitive drive that exists completely outside of everything his father built. And that drive, if it does what it is capable of doing, is going to sit a championship belt on top of an empire that already has almost everything else. That would be the one thing Hamlet Tsarukyan's money could not simply purchase. His son would have to go and take it So where does it go from here? The path is clear in one direction and complicated in another. Arman Tsarukyan is the mandatory challenger for the UFC lightweight title. A win does not just make him champion, it makes him the most commercially interesting lightweight champion in years. A man with a name that carries weight in Armenia the way no UFC champion's name has carried weight in that country before. The endorsement landscape, the international event possibilities, the reach into a diaspora that spans Europe and the United States. The business case for an Arman Tsarukyan championship is not theoretical. It is real and it is large. But the sporting path is what it is. The lightweight division does not give away titles. It extracts them from you over hard rounds, across painful camps, through decisions and finishes that test everything you have ever built. And Arman knows that. His entire career has been a demonstration that he understands difficulty. He has never taken the easy road. He has always taken the one that makes sense when it is finished. Everything the Tsarukyan family has ever built was built the long way. Arman Tsarukyan did not build a conglomerate overnight. He built it deal by deal, project by project, year after year, in a country that was not always easy to build in. And Arman has absorbed that, not just as inspiration, as operating principle. His role will be longer than his talent will suggest it needs to be, longer than his ranking, longer than his highlight reel. But everything this family touches has been built to last. And nobody inside that Yerevan compound, nobody inside AKA, nobody who has watched this family operate across 2 generations, believes this story ends any other way than with Arman's hand raised. The empire was always going to need a champion at the top of it. He is coming to collect